Happy Friday, everybody. My name is Peggy O'Flaherty. I'm the CEO of Vinly. And Vinly is a platform that brings people together in conversations that matter. This call is actually Jeremy Burton's call, which is featuring the unfair advantage, where he interviews his famous founders and their stories of the ups and downs of being a founder. I'm so excited that he's actually going to be interviewing Molly Hanten today, which I can't wait to hear about her three-sided marketplace. The reason why the Vinly events are unique and special is, one, we ask if people are comfortable to have their cameras on, because one of the things that's really interesting and unique about Vinly is that we really want everybody to feel seen and heard. And that has a lot to do with the fact that we feel like we live in a really busy world, and we want it to be a really good use of everybody's time. So when people feel comfortable, we love that your cameras are on. And then in the chat, feel free to introduce yourself. Jeremy will also add a chat to Vinly. So after this call, we can keep the conversation going, and everything we learn from Molly and Jeremy, we can keep the conversation going after this. And then the Vinly AI will match us with people on this call and people within Jeremy's platform studio, so we can meet other founders, investors, and people within his network that can help us on our journey. So Jeremy, I'll hand the rest over to you, and I will mute myself until the end to wrap it up.
Thank you so much. And the group is live on Vinly. Maybe someone could post it into the chat on the call so people can ask questions there. Feel free to add questions as we go. But without further ado, I want to welcome Molly. Thank you for spending the time joining us today for the Unfair Advantage. This is Unfair Advantage number 2. And Molly, I appreciate it because I know founders are always insanely busy. So the cost is very high. I think what we'll do today is we'll chat for about 25 minutes and then turn it over to audience questions. I think a good place to start is, we at Platform think a lot about product market fit, but I think equally important is what you might call founder startup fit. And we're always trying to find founders with deep expertise in the markets that they're targeting. So maybe that'd be a good place to start. Maybe you could unpack for us sort of the why you around PartyPlease. Tell us a bit about what PartyPlease does and your background and why it was relevant.
Okay, great. So I had founded various different companies that all, as a founder, one was in fitness, one was in fashion, more, small businesses that required a lot of events. And when you're a founder, you're kind of the one who ends up being in charge of all of those events. And almost, I think, like every founder nowadays has probably planned or run an event on their own. It's a big part of building branding and marketing, and especially more so for like small businesses, but even today now, large startups as well. So I had worn many hats and planned tons of events. And then through my fitness company, had connected with Lululemon, and then went internal to Lululemon's team and was working on their corporate events team, and learned a lot there. And then was also so amazed at like such a big company, how everything is kind of run the same. Like I thought maybe just since I was a small business founder, I just kind of did things scrappy, but that the event industry is very fragmented anyways. And I was just amazed that that's even the same thing at a very large company. And then I also started just planning events for friends, family on the side, because I thought it was fun and had learned a lot about it. And as a lot of people in the event industry know, once you've built a vendor network, it gets a lot easier to throw those events. But if you haven't built that vendor network, or you haven't done this, it seems kind of like a big thing and a big operation to get into events. So with that, then I connected with Platform, and they were very interested in an event and a party type business. And then that's kind of where, and I won't go into too much because I'll probably get into other questions, I assume, but how this came to be and how I, came to be a fit for it.
That's great. I remember it well. One of the things you touched on there is probably worth unpacking a bit. So we focus a lot on marketplace businesses, I think, as most people know. And one of the signals we look for that points us towards maybe there's a marketplace opportunity that isn't well served is fragmentation. That's a term that you used. So event planning is, fragmented, chaotic, last minute, lots of problems to solve, I imagine. Where did you start? What is the first sort of part of that ball of wax that you decided to tackle first, and why?
Okay, so it has changed a little bit, but we first started with vendors, and the focus was, okay, if we can just get vendors all on these platforms, on this platform, maybe we can use AI, and maybe the user can just build these parties themselves, like really a build it your own. And that is definitely the most fragmented part, but what we've come to discover is that like the actual planner was that missing link. And we might talk more about that as well, but that's really what helped us take off. So that's how we kind of added it in to be a third party or a three-way marketplace. But we started focusing on the vendor network.
So let's maybe dig into that. So, you learned that maybe the planner was the key third leg of the stool. So what are the sort of signals that you saw that led you to discover that as you went on this journey of finding product market fit? Like what were you seeing or not seeing that kind of made the light bulb go on?
Yep. We were seeing people like sort of build party carts is what we called them at the time. And then we were seeing like that was one thing, but then not a checkout. And so, I had to assume with some of the data we had, like, okay, they're either missing something in that party, they have questions that aren't answered in these listings. There's some reason they're not moving forward with the party. And then two, when there were a few people checking out the vendor, and this is a huge part of the industry, that is why we added in planners. The vendors are very slow. They're very old school. Some wouldn't even sign up because they only use Venmo or stuff like that. Aren't even familiar with like Stripe as a payment platform. So they're kind of stuck in the past a little bit, and that. As someone who'd planned events, I kind of would like look at these parties and look at these vendors not replying to hosts who were sending them messages trying to book them. And I would literally be like, I just want to jump in because like I can close that loop. And as a planner, I would like the original thesis was like, we can just remove we can make hosts become planners and there doesn't need to be a planner. And we realized that like there does need to be that third party. And then that's what we can really build the technology around.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So I think it's really interesting to see how this assumption that you can just jump in and replace people with technology is more nuanced. Yeah, I do think we've maybe missed a step, and that's maybe my fault. We probably should define a vendor for people that aren't familiar.
Yes, I was thinking of that.
What do you mean?
Yeah. As I said, host, I'm like, people probably don't know what that means. Like an Airbnb host maybe or whatever. So vendors are like, for example, let's say it's a kid's party, someone who does face painting, someone who makes the cupcakes, someone who does catering, someone who you rent a bounce house from, and someone who does decor. Those are all different vendors is what you call them in the industry. And then planner is the event or party planner professional. And then host is me, who's throwing my son's first birthday party, who's looking to work with a planner to get the end result of hosting my party.
Got it. So maybe we just have a little diversion into, how big a market this is. I mean, at one level, of course, we can all understand that every kid has a birthday every year. Every person has a birthday every year. People have engagement parties. But maybe this isn't a space that traditionally venture has been that interested in. Yeah. And I'm sure you've gotten the question from investors, is this a big market? Maybe just tell us a bit about how big the market is.
Yeah. So we light assumptions are that, there are for this target over 1 million parties that take place a year. And even if we get a small percentage of that, average party value is about $5,500. And then there's a whole planner side of the industry as well, that they are paying to use our service as well. So, and we haven't even talked about weddings yet. We do believe that in the future we can make a huge impact on weddings and corporate events. So far, we've literally just focused on like children's parties, and then showers of any kind are basically our second largest group. So yeah, the birthday parties alone are enough to sustain a large business. And then we know that with like corporate and weddings that, 10x is the space, if not more.
Yeah, it's amazing when you discover a little, or not a little, a big market that maybe Silicon Valley has not spent a lot of time in.
Yep.
It makes sense in retrospect. One of the things you touched on there, you were talking about how these vendors are, struggling with new technology. They are fragmented. I think in any marketplace, trust is such an important thing for people to transact in the market. Maybe you can tell us a bit about sort of how do you persuade those because every marketplace is trying to tackle this chicken and egg problem. And I guess in a three-sided marketplace, I don't know whether it's 2 chickens and 1 egg or 2 eggs and 1 chicken, but there's a process here of, getting those early users and getting them to trust. Maybe you can tell us a bit about that. How do you build trust and get them engaged?
Yeah. With vendors, it was interestingly, we just focused on like per city, and there's a very nice network effect that like once like they would talk to each other, they'd be like, hey, did you hear, for example, we just started with Charleston was the first city we went after because it's a very event heavy city. Lots of people throw parties there, bachelorette parties, showers, you name it. People like to spend money there on events and parties. That's just one of the few cities, but we started there. The vendor network was like super strong. They, would be like, oh, actually, yeah, my friend who makes cakes mentioned you to me. So they had no problem signing up that way. And that really helped the vendor network grow. Then planners also talk to vendors. So that really helped that grow. And then planners also refer planners because we do well with people who are already in the industry, but we also do really well with people who like are thinking about wanting to become an event and party planner, but aren't totally confident enough to just launch a business on their own and get up a website and sell it to their friends and family. So we have a lot of good planners who, for example, we do really well with teachers because they have the summer off and they're really good at like planning and they're very creative and they do, lesson planning, etc. So they'll tell a few other teachers that they work with about it and then they'll join. So the network effect has been really helpful for us, and we've seemed to have found an industry where people really talk and recommend things to each other.
Yeah, I think those network effects are just killer, and it's really interesting. Until you kind of immerse yourself in them, you don't necessarily know exactly how that's going to work and who's going to refer.
Yeah.
Fascinating. So that's, I'm sure we'll come back to PartyPlease, but, a big part of it is obviously also you as a founder, understanding your personal journey. We always talk about this as a roller coaster ride for founders. 1 week you're up, next week you're down, and it's kind of a stressful experience, obviously. No surprise in saying that. Maybe you could share with us, on your journey, what surprised you the most, good or bad, in your journey as a founder?
I think that's a good question. I think like this is my first experience like more technology focused. So it's really hard at first if you haven't done technology to think like you don't need the full end product that you have envisioned. And like you get really attached to what you think that product should look like. And I couldn't, and I think this is probably pretty common. I couldn't understand how we can launch this as like just an MVP and like not have every bell and whistle that is in my end result mind, because like what we see and we compare ourselves to are like Airbnb and big names that we've all known have sold for billions of dollars, because that's who we want to be. So it's really hard because you don't really pay a lot of attention to the smaller technology businesses as a founder, because that's not really who you want to be. So you're not looking at a lot of MVPs. You're looking at who you want to get to. So that I think was like just a shock and really, really hard for me at first. Now I've almost gone the opposite way where I'm like, ugh, get rid of all of that. We don't need that. I can see how much and how well we can do with simplicity. And then I've learned like wait until someone's begging you for a feature to spend the time and money on that feature. But at first, like we way overbuilt from my direction because I really thought we had to.
Yeah, I see that, you know, in almost every startup is the desire to have everything and boil the ocean, and what you end up with is a sort of messy product with lots of half-finished features rather than a product that does a few things really well. So a common experience. And maybe staying kind of on the product side, is there a sort of anecdote from an early customer interaction or user interaction that you kind of particularly keep coming back to that guided how you decided what to build or what not to build, or kind of shapes the product?
Yeah, there's been a handful, but I think the biggest ones are, which is very cool. We have a feature where you can see the conversations going on between planners and hosts. And there's, originally we had it that you could like text with your host or email with your host. And we saw like, and we'd get, we had a ton of amazing reviews, but we would get some reviews back about planners that like as an admin I couldn't go in and see their communications on, and so like there was no way we could either defend, you know, not making a refund or defend our planner. So we spent a lot of time and money building all of that communication internal, similar to like I talk about Rover a lot. I really like their communications, how the user can text back, but it actually is all going through the platform. And at first we didn't have any of that. And, you know, the user had to either fully log into the platform, which then we saw a ton of breakdown and like people not coming back in because we didn't build this as an app, you know, at first. So then our planners would text them, but then, like I said, we'd lose all that communication. So one of the biggest things was moving that all in, taking the time and resources to do so. And that's been a huge game changer for both sides. Both sides really like it. And it also really helps us if we ever have to go in and be involved in, you know, post reflection. So what this was it was one host who had a, you know, $30,000 baby shower. The color theme was yellow and white. And the host came back that the yellows of the umbrella were slightly off with the yellows of the tablecloths and were like beyond livid. And none of that communication was captured anywhere. None of the photos going back and forth were captured anywhere. So it was kind of like, who knows what happened with that. So now we have that all in there, which protects both sides.
Amazing. Yeah. I've seen this in these marketplace businesses again and again. The earlier you can get all the communication to happen on platform,
yes,
the better you are, because everything's in one place. There's ability to monitor and really track the outcomes. Really fascinating stuff. Maybe in a similar vein, you know, I wrote a piece not too long ago about pivots, right? And the tough thing around pivots. Pivot is a term that people throw around in startups. You know, they're part of startup life. Maybe can you dig a bit more into a pivot that you feel you've made? You know, what prompted the pivot? Do you think it was the right pivot looking back? Do you feel like you made it early enough in the journey?
Yeah. Which I've kind of touched on a lot. It was definitely our pivot to the planner focus. Like I said, at first we very much wanted and like almost tried to force this to be like vendors and like build your own. The hosts can do this all by themselves. And even at the very beginning, we like thought and talked about before we did that, like, should this just be a place for to find a party planner and make working with a party planner easier, and then make it easier for the planner to grow that business? And also like spent a lot of time looking around and saw that didn't exist anymore or anywhere. There's things like it. So we already knew that was a hole, but you know, we just thought with like AI and technology, like you can get rid of them. And we like I shared at the beginning, we saw signs of things working, and then there would be this breakdown. So then we just added a button to test it, because I had learned like, let's not overbuild everything. Let's test this first. We put a button on the homepage that was either like build your own party or work with a planner. And the data very quickly showed us everyone was clicking on work with a planner. And we went from like, our first few months making like $2,000 to $3,000 to like 30,000 that month that we put that button on, and then just only going up from there into the hundreds. So we were quickly like, oh, okay, that's it. And then started building everything around that.
Yeah. So that was the key insight, kind of the unlock.
Yep.
It's great. So maybe, we can get a bit into always a tough subject, which is there's a sort of reality distortion field I think that founders have to have, because on one hand, if you look at the numbers, I mean, that 99% of startups fail. But you kind of have to believe as a founder that you're going to be part of that 1% that succeeds, otherwise you wouldn't do it. Is there a moment in which you felt honestly like PartyPlease was going to fail? And if so, what kept you sort of going? What kept you from walking away?
Yes, I think so. Winter months are not the busiest time for parties and events. Lots of people are doing like family events, planning, Thanksgiving holiday parties on their own. So the first time we went through a winter few months, I was just like so panicked, and like even though I knew this was that this had highs and lows season, and it's very much spring and summer go crazy. But even still, when winter comes around, I'm always like, oh my God. It's like, but we historically know this is the time that that it's just not as busy. So I think the biggest thing I learned in that is just like, you also go through this, like, should we change everything? Like even though, it's seasonal. And so I think the first time we experienced winter, I was like, it's all over and we need to change everything. And then it's literally like 2 months and then it started going back to normal. So now I've learned that and going above normal. So that was good.
Yeah, that's good. You made it through.
Yeah.
What's the hardest thing right now? Is it, fundraising, hiring, products, marketing? What is the hardest thing in the business feel like today?
I think it's like we're in this stage of definitely have found product market fit, but like regional growth is challenging in a way. Like we continue to want to grow faster and faster with the planner side, but then we also, and this is classic of course any marketplace, but then we also have to make sure that we're getting them enough leads in their city when they launch, and we have to make sure they have a good vendor network to support them. So it's like wanting to go fast and spend money on marketing to grow the planner side, while balancing it with making sure that we're growing the host side, and then also teaching and empowering the planners on how to grow the vendor network at the same time. Which is of course classic of a marketplace, but you really understand why that's something that everyone talks about.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think there are sort of physical marketplaces that are offering, a physical product or a physical service.
Yep.
It's quite different to a, purely virtual marketplace. And I think
Yep.
you've got that, in the first group, you've got that mini chicken and egg problem that happens again and again in every market, because you can't serve all of your demand with the same supply like you can in a virtual marketplace. So I think that becomes a very key part of the rollout plan, is thinking through that geographic strategy, like which markets in which order, and how do you tackle them.
Yep. Yes.
I'm gonna ask you a question that I think is super important here. Between myself and my partner in platform, Tim, we have 5 daughters, and female entrepreneurship is super important to us. And I, of course, have 2 female founders on this call who I've backed. Maybe you can talk about that. It looks like the data is going the wrong direction on this, that fewer female founders are getting backed. I'd love to hear just from you, kind of your experience, the ways in which maybe it's been hard, your kind of views from it as a female founder.
Yeah. It is a shame because women also spend the most money. So using women who are a lot of times the majority of the household spending, as founders have, key insights to what we're going to spend on and why we spend. And this is, I've seen challenges with that in especially pitching and having conversations with VCs. What you hear on podcasts, I've literally heard the exact thing of like, well, I don't know. My wife plans those things. So I don't really know if there's money there because I don't do it. And it's like, oh, well, you could just ask her. And like, have you seen the parties that she's thrown? They probably look like there's a lot of money spent there. So those things are like a bummer when you actually hear them, because it's kind of like, oh, I bet it's not really that way. But it is. So I think, just the more like female entrepreneurs can get out and share the businesses that they're building and share confidently the businesses that they're building on things like this is huge. And being for women to be able to have these conversations and people to be willing to host them and talk to the female founders are huge. And then there's a few groups that I've joined that are female founders. I think that's really helpful because I've really found that other female founders like really want to support each other, share each other's companies, and connect you with investors. Not that males don't, but I've seen a lot of that with the females in the industry. So that's been very cool. And then I think, to make connections with female investors and founders as well is extremely helpful too, because they're really excited to work with you as well. But I will say I have almost all except one are male investors in my company. So I've found a lot of good men that are excited about the industry, and a lot of them have said them and their wives have spent a lot of money on planning, and they've seen how stressed that like their wife is, for example, about a child's birthday party. So they did see the connect very easily. So
Yeah, no, it makes a huge amount of sense given who generally is doing the work. That makes sense. So maybe we can end, just so we get to any questions from the audience, bringing it all the way back to the top. This series is called The Unfair Advantage. And really it's around understanding, where can we create an sustainable, defensible advantage for each startup. What does that mean to you? What do you think is the unfair advantage that you or PartyPlease has and that others can't copy?
I think there are a lot of platforms out there that have the vendor, like basically have become vendor listing sites, and the vendors pay, some of them are like $350 a month. Some of them are that they pay for leads. And I think that still, I've always said this, that still puts all the work back on the host and the person that's signing up for the end result. And I think something that there are other businesses out there like us, too, that I talk about a lot are, oh my God, I'm forgetting the travel one, Fora Travel, and then Havenly, who Fora Travel does this for like travel advisors, and then Havenly does this for people that are in interior design. But nobody's done that in the party space. And I think once we start doing it and we've really built like training and technology for our planners, that would be a pretty big deal for any of those other businesses to pivot to. And they're doing well, with their structure as well. So I think really discovering that and what we were trying to build and seeing it work already, and seeing the network effects work for us already, will give us the unfair advantage, and will continue to.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Molly.
Yeah.
I want to open the floor. This is a informal event, so please just feel free to ask your question live if you have one for Molly. I'm sure there are questions.
I can go first. I have 3 questions. I'll ask one and then give other people an opportunity, but feel free to come back to me. My name's Abby. Molly, Jeremy, thank you so much. It's a very interesting session, and I actually like the intimacy of the group size, so that's great. Molly, can you talk a little bit about how you visualize the fragmentation in the beginning? How do you show that the industry is so fragmented?
What do you mean by that? Like how did
How do
I
you
show
paint
it?
the picture or the narrative, either for investors or for users, that
Okay.
there's value in defragmenting or centralizing that industry need?
Yeah. In our like pitch deck, for example, we had showed just all the different types of communication that were taking place. So one of the biggest things that we visualized was like a host needing to speak to a vendor and how long it took how long the wait was to hear back from that vendor. And then a host, most of the time they're trying to price shop, which our planners do and our technology does for them. So then they're reaching out to 4 vendors and then they're hearing back from all these different vendors at a different time. And some of them have price points that they won't service under or over. So adding all that in, then we had like tentacles going off to reaching out to party planners and waiting to get bids back from them. And then we had, the timeline that they needed to book everything by because everything's going to be sold out by this time. And then they have to get invites out by that time. And then the biggest thing is the communication. So like I'm a host hosting one party and I'm communicating, sometimes with upwards of 10 different vendors, all with different timelines. And then all with different communication styles, someone to text, someone to have host a call, someone to do it over email. And then they all take different forms of payment. So I'm sending someone a personal PayPal because they don't want it to show up on their taxes, so they won't take payment any other way. Someone does it via Venmo. Another person, you have to log into like their contract platform to sign their contract and make payment. So we kind of laid out all of that. And with us, you communicate with one person, you pay everything in one place. All of your cancellations and contracts and all that is all the same and built into one piece. So like as the host, everything, communication's easier, payment is easier. And of course the full planning is easier. And it's one tentacle versus like 15 on different timelines.
Thank you.
Let's have a question. Yeah, Michael, please.
Molly, first off, congratulations on your
Thanks.
venture, and so cool to see your passion come through in this.
Thank
and
you.
It's obvious you're in this space. But I'll say something, I guess, a little bit cheeky here. I've heard that people that get a tattoo don't stop at one. I don't have any tattoos. And then I see that I often see founders don't stop at one. Like this is now 3rd, 4th company, I think, for you. And what could you comment on that could share out to somebody that hasn't done any? That would be like, hey, here's an insight now. I've got 2 or 3 of these under my belt. Here's like a magic bullet for you or a big time insight that I have now that I use now in my 3rd, but that maybe others could lock onto for their 1st.
Yes. I think like, and I also started my first one when I was like 23. So I think sometimes the younger you are, the like more you think even though you grow to learn that you don't. So it would just be like, you probably have a great idea and you probably do know what it should look like and what you want it to be in the end result, but like be very open to talking to a bunch of other people in the industry. That was something that platform like forced me to do, which like the first few weeks I spent doing it, I was like, I don't need to do this. I know what, and I learned a lot that way. So like really, and it's really hard, doing it on your own to spend your time and money doing that, but like really take the time to research. And one of the biggest things I learned was like, and I had done this with my 2 other companies before, is like, I thought like I knew what I wanted. And so I thought everybody else wanted that too. And like, you very well may have a key insight, but the more people you talk to, industry experts, and do your research, you have to be open-minded to seeing that like it might be different than what you actually thought it was, like the build your own party and vendors. And you are only going to know that by being open-minded, and that will most likely get you more success faster than just like, I have this idea, I'm so excited about it, let's build exactly that.
Thank you.
Should we go back to Abby for a second question if anyone else has one?
My second question is, a lot of times in marketplace founding, either investors or yourself are looking for monthly reoccurring revenue versus transactional. So how did you build in some security around your revenue model?
Yep. So that's huge, and we talk about a lot for us, is the planners who are getting leads, they pay a monthly subscription, and we're working on introducing some tiers for that as well. And the hosts just pay a transaction fee at the end, where we do make a lot of money off of, but that was like some initial conversations before, and we didn't have planners paying at first, mainly because we wanted to like see, will anyone join this and be a planner for us? But then we did add that fee in, because if we're only relying, like you said, on every time someone's throwing a party, then we're also always just spending money on those ads to acquire new customers. Of course, we have customers that come back because once they plan a party with us, they just see that it's so much easier. But that's a lot harder and longer path to build than obviously the monthly planner subscriptions.
Okay, thank you.
I think you should roll
Molly,
it. Third. Oh,
I was like, I could ask my third one
Yeah,
too.
go ahead.
Peggy, go.
I was just curious if you've worked with influencers as well.
We have, and it did go well. We've done it like once or twice. They are, just a very expensive market right now. But we have had some very good success with them. One actually was an event planner who ended up getting us a lot of event planners interested in joining the platform. That went really well. And then we had one who threw a party. And then the cool thing about that was obviously she has a lot of other like influencers and just more influential people that follow her. So then we got a handful of them who were interested in doing events with us. It is something we want to continue to focus on. It's just a pretty expensive marketing tactic that is more of like a long play than like what we do really well with right now is Google Ads party planner near me, because that person is very much looking for a party.
Yeah, and the teachers are a big influencer network too.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, totally.
yeah, sometimes the micro teacher can
Yep.
be a good one because they're a little bit more of a affordable
Yep.
influencer.
Yeah, micro is great. I agree.
Michael, why don't you go? I think you raised your hand.
It's like a tennis match here. Hit the ball back.
Yeah.
I'm super curious about with Jeremy here, allowing the Jeremys here. Now you're doing a startup in a studio model where you've got, I think, access to extras like Jeremy and his team. Beyond something like that, that's a very obvious thing. What else is the studio model doing for you in this stage of your business? And it probably contrasts with your other ventures that you did outside of this.
Yeah.
Could you comment there?
Yeah, well, the support, yes, in general, of someone who's done this and just someone to bounce ideas off of, and also like who has experienced a lot of the things that I'm experienced before. So sometimes when I get like nervous about something, or like, can I change this fee or this or that? Like Jeremy can literally share stories of how he'd done it before and it worked or didn't work. That's super nice and helpful. Or a lot of the other businesses he's seen do those, and he can help me compare to what a lot of the other businesses are doing, which like you just wouldn't have that insight, without reading articles now, and you wouldn't get a lot of the actual like numbers and data. And then who is on this call, Luch, for an example, is our engineer. And so I'm able to like use a part-time engineer, which with technology these days is sometimes what you need until you're at a certain level, who's like really good. And I wouldn't be able to probably work with or find to be interested in working in my startup at the level that he's at, that I'm able to have been using for quite some time, and who knows my product now, very, very well.
That's cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go with number 3.
Okay.
Back to the competition and just the industry in general. So you talk about fragmentation in the beginning, right? Before technology. Now there's technology, and it seems as though it still is fragmented. You mentioned there's other marketplaces that maybe do more of a listing, or they focus more on the vendors, or they focus on different aspects. Do you see in the future a consolidation or a contraction of the market, and you having to offer more, right? Expand outside of what your current offering is? A lot of times you see success in niche early, but then you have to kind of capture more of that to make it, again, less fragmented and more universal successful.
I think just the numbers show that like we're very niche right now just with like the party type, but we know that if we literally just expand party type and region, we can be, just as large or larger than some of the competitors out there that are doing it quite differently.
Okay, we probably have time for one more question. there is one.
Yes, I want to ask, which market do you think you might go to next?
We've kind of we technically plan everywhere in the US because we do virtual events. I didn't even get into that. We do a lot of virtual planning. A little over half is actually virtual. People are very open to that and it's gone really well for us. But we do better in cities where we have a planner. So we're currently working on expanding to some more like A markets really in California. We have a good amount in the LA area and we're trying to grow a little bit more in San Francisco, but then to more of like the outskirts. Cause like, for example, like Napa Valley, we have people from San Francisco that will travel there, but we just don't have enough. And then same in like the LA area, some will travel to San Diego, but they'll like charge the customer for it. So we're trying to get into more of those markets, specifically California. And then same thing of like outside of New York, like Connecticut, for example, some of our planners will travel there, but it costs the host more. And hosts really appreciate somewhere local. So expanding outside of those. And then same thing in like Texas, Dallas, Houston area.
Fantastic. Well, Molly, I want to give you the opportunity to, before we wrap up, to plug yourself and your business. Where should people? Is it PartyPlease.co? Is that right?
Yep, PartyPlease.co, and then we're at PartyPlease.planners on Instagram and TikTok, and there's a lot of fun like behind the scenes type content on there. And that's where you can learn about joining as a planner or joining as a vendor or coming on as a host who needs a party.
Yeah, lots of great parties to check out on there.
Yeah, yep.
Well, thank you very much, Molly, for spending the
Thank
time with us. I know it's
so fun.
Expensive time. I'm sure people learned a lot from this, and this was great. This was the unfair advantage. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. I dropped the chat that we can continue the conversation in the chat for Vinly. So join us over there. And thank you, Molly. Thank you, Jeremy. Have a great Friday, everybody.
Thank you.